northeastern corner of Africa, there is a desert, so vast and so merciless that almost nothing survives in it. The Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth, a sea of sand and stone that stretches from the Atlantic coast to the Red Sea, where the sun burns without mercy, where rain is a rumor, where the wind moves dunes like slow waves across a dead ocean. And through the middle of this desert, a river flows. The Nile, the longest river in the world, 6,600 kilometers, rising in the mountains of Central Africa, flowing north through Sudan and Egypt to the Mediterranean Sea. Every year, without fail, the Nile floods. It overflows its banks. It spreads across the desert floor. And when it retreats, it leaves behind something precious, a layer of dark, rich silt, black and fertile, full of everything a seed needs to become food. The ancient Egyptians called it the Black Land, Kemet, the narrow ribbon of life on either side of the river. Beyond it, in every direction, was the Red Land, the desert, death. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, traveled to Egypt in the 5th century, before the Common Era, and he wrote something that has been quoted for 2,500 years. Egypt, he said, is the gift of the Nile. It is the most precise description ever written of a civilization, because without that river, without that annual flood, without that black silt, there is no Egypt, no pyramids, no pharaohs, no hieroglyphs, no mummies, no 3,000 years of one of the most extraordinary civilizations in human history. Tonight, we follow that civilization from its earliest beginnings, on the banks of that river, to its final breath, 3,000 years later. Slowly, calmly, from the very beginning. Close your eyes if you wish. The Nile is flowing, and our story begins. We continue our story. For thousands of years before the Great Pyramids, before the Pharaohs, before the hieroglyphs, people live along the Nile. Small villages, farmers who plant their seeds in the black silt the river leaves behind. Fishermen who cast their nets into the green water. Hunters who move through the papyrus marshes at the river's edge. Over centuries, these villages grow. They join together. They form larger communities. And eventually, two distinct kingdoms emerge. Upper Egypt in the south, where the Nile flows through a narrow valley. between high desert cliffs. Its symbol is the white crown. Its flower is the lotus. Lower Egypt in the north, where the Nile fans out into a great delta, before meeting the Mediterranean. Its symbol is the red crown. Its flower is the papyrus. For generations, these two kingdoms exist as separate worlds, speaking the same language, worshipping similar gods, but governed by different rulers with different customs, different capitals, different ways of seeing the world they share. Around 3100, before the Common Era, a king of Upper Egypt unites the two lands. His name, according to tradition, is Nama, though some call him Mens. History is not always precise about its beginnings. He wears both crowns, the white and the red combined into one, the double crown, the crown of all Egypt. A capital is established at Memphis, near the place where Upper and Lower Egypt meet, where the valley becomes the delta, where the two worlds touch. And from this moment, one of the longest lasting civilizations in human history begins its 3,000-year journey. In our next chapter, the kings of this new united land establish something that no human being has ever built before, and that no human being has matched since. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. For thousands of years before the Great Pyramids, before the Pharaohs, before the hieroglyphs, people live along the Nile. Small villages, farmers who plant their seeds in the black silt the river leaves behind, fishermen who cast their nets into the green water, hunters who move through the papyrus marshes at the river's edge. Over centuries, these villages grow. They join together, they form larger communities, and eventually, two distinct kingdoms emerge. Upper Egypt in the south, where the Nile flows through a narrow valley between high desert cliffs. Its symbol is the white crown. Its flower is the lotus. Lower Egypt in the north, where the Nile fans out into a great delta before meeting the Mediterranean. Its symbol is the red crown. Its flower is the papyrus. For generations, these two kingdoms exist as separate worlds, speaking the same language, worshipping similar gods, but governed by different rulers with different customs, different capitals, different ways of seeing the world they share. Around 3100, before the Common Era, a king of Upper Egypt unites the two lands. His name, according to tradition, is Nama, though some call him Mens. History is not always precise about its beginnings. He wears both crowns, the white and the red combined into one, the double crown, the crown of all Egypt. The capital is established at Memphis, near the place where Upper and Lower Egypt meet, where the valley becomes the delta, where the two worlds touch. And from this moment, one of the longest lasting civilizations in human history begins its 3,000-year journey. In our next chapter, the kings of this new united land establish something that no human being has ever built before, and that no human being has matched since. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. For thousands of years before the Great Pyramids, before the Pharaohs, before the hieroglyphs, people live along the Nile. Small villages, farmers who plant their seeds in the black silt the river leaves behind, fishermen who cast their nets into the green water, hunters who move through the papyrus marshes at the river's edge. Over centuries, these villages grow, they join together, they form larger communities, and eventually, two distinct kingdoms emerge. Upper Egypt in the south, where the Nile flows through a narrow valley, between high desert cliffs. Its symbol is the white crown, its flower is the lotus. Lower Egypt in the north, where the Nile fans out into a great delta. Before meeting the Mediterranean, its symbol is the red crown, its flower is the papyrus. For generations, these two kingdoms exist as separate worlds, speaking the same language. We continue our story. Egypt is unified. Memphis is its capital. And at the center of everything stands a single figure, the pharaoh. Not a king in the way. Other civilizations understand kings. Not merely a ruler, not simply a general, or a lawgiver, or a man born into power. Something more, something beyond. The pharaoh is a god in life. He is the earthly incarnation of Horus, the falcon god, son of Osiris, lord of the sky, protector of Egypt. In death, he becomes Osiris himself, god of the underworld, ruler of the eternal realm where all souls must eventually travel. This is not metaphor. The ancient Egyptians believe it completely with absolute certainty, the way later civilizations believe other absolute truths. The pharaoh's role is to maintain Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian word for truth, justice, order, cosmic harmony, the proper balance of all things. When Ma'at is maintained, the Nile floods on schedule, the crops grow, the sun rises and sets as it should. The stars follow their paths, the world continues. When Ma'at is broken, chaos follows, drought, famine, invasion, the collapse of everything the Egyptians have built. This is why the pharaoh has absolute power. Not because he takes it, but because the universe requires it. Because someone must stand between the human world and the divine order. And that someone is the pharaoh. He wears the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. He carries the crook and the flail, symbols of his authority. He is never depicted as weak, never as old, never as uncertain. Always striding forward, always strong, always divine. In our next chapter, this divine authority is expressed in stone in a way that will last 5,000 years. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is approximately 2630 before the Common Era. Egypt is in its third dynasty. The pharaoh is a man named Djoser, and he has a problem. He will die. Every pharaoh dies. Every god made flesh must eventually return to the divine realm. And when that happens, the body must be preserved. The spirit must be housed. The journey to the afterlife must be prepared for with the same care and precision that one would prepare for a long and dangerous voyage. For generations, Egyptian kings have been buried in flat-roofed tombs called mastabas. Simple, solid, unremarkable, not quite adequate for a living god. Djoser turns to his vizier, his chief minister, his most trusted advisor, a man named Imhotep. Imhotep is extraordinary, even by the standards of an extraordinary age. He is a physician, an architect, a scribe, a mathematician, a philosopher. He will eventually be deified, worshipped as a god of medicine for 2,000 years after his death. Djoser tells Imhotep to build something worthy of a divine pharaoh. Imhotep looks at the mastaba and thinks, and then does something no architect has ever done before. He stacks one mastaba on top of another, then another on top of that, each one smaller than the last, 6 layers rising into the desert sky. The Step Pyramid of Saqqara, the first large stone building in human history, 62 meters high, built from limestone blocks, each one cut and fitted with a precision that still astonishes modern engineers. It stands today, 4,600 years old, still standing in the desert south of Cairo. The first great stone structure humanity ever built. In our next chapter, the idea of the pyramid reaches its ultimate expression, and a single man commands the building of a monument that will be called one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is approximately 2560 before the Common Era. The desert plateau of Giza, just south of what is today Cairo. The pharaoh is Khufu, called Cheops by the Greeks, 4th dynasty. A man of whom we know surprisingly little. Only one small ivory statue has ever been found. His face. The face of the man who commanded the largest construction project in human history. What he commands to be built is a pyramid, but not like Imhotep's pyramid. Not a series of steps, rising in stages. A true pyramid, 4 smooth triangular faces, meeting at a single point at the top, aimed at the stars of the constellation. The Egyptians called the imperishable ones, where the souls of dead pharaohs were believed to travel. The numbers are almost impossible to hold in the mind. 2.3 million stone blocks, each one weighing between 2 and 80 tons, quarried from limestone cliffs across the river, transported by boat, hauled up ramps by teams of workers, fitted together with such precision that a piece of paper cannot be inserted between the stones. 146 meters tall, the tallest structure on Earth. For 3,800 years, until the medieval cathedrals of Europe finally exceeded it. 20 years to build, perhaps 100,000 workers, not slaves as was once believed, but skilled laborers, fed and housed and cared for by the state. Workers who left graffiti on the stones they placed, names of their gangs, friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure, human voices, preserved in stone for 4.5 millennia. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, still standing. In our next chapter, beside the pyramid, something equally strange and equally magnificent is waiting to be discovered. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Beside the Great Pyramid, at the edge of the Giza plateau, where the desert meets the sky, there is a figure that has watched the world change for 4,500 years. The Great Sphinx. The body of a lion, the head of a king, 73 meters long, 20 meters high, carved from a single ridge of limestone bedrock, the largest monolithic statue in the world. Its face gazes east, toward the rising sun, toward the horizon where Ra begins his daily journey across the sky. Who built it? When? Why? The most widely accepted view is that it was built during the reign of Khafre, Khufu's son, who built the second Great Pyramid beside his father's. The face of the Sphinx, many scholars believe, bears Khafre's features. A king who wished to stand eternal guard over the plateau, where the gods of his family were buried. But the Sphinx holds its secrets tightly without apology. Over the millennia, the desert claims it slowly. Sand accumulates, wind carves it. The face is damaged, perhaps by time, perhaps by those who came later and found the old gods threatening. Centuries pass. The Sphinx is buried to its neck in sand, forgotten, half invisible. The pyramid still visible above the desert, but the figure at their feet, swallowed by the Sahara. Pharaohs come and go, empires rise and fall. The Sphinx waits. It is still waiting. In our next chapter, the civilization that built these wonders faces its first great collapse and must find a way to begin again. Rest now. The story continues. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The Old Kingdom has reached its greatest heights. The pyramids of Giza stand complete. The Sphinx watches the horizon. The pharaoh rules as a god. Egypt is the most powerful and most organized civilization on earth. And then the Nile fails. Around 2200, before the Common Era, something changes in the climate of Northeast Africa. The annual flood becomes unreliable. Some years it does not come at all. Some years it comes too small. Too little water, too little silt, too little food. The harvests fail, the granaries empty, the people grow hungry. An ancient Egyptian text survives from this period. It is called The Admonitions of Ipua, a scribe who witnessed what happened next. He describes a world turned upside down. The poor have become rich. The rich have become poor. The dead are being thrown into the river. Laughter has perished. The land is mourning. The central government collapses. The pharaoh can no longer maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order that his divinity is supposed to guarantee. Local governors take power into their own hands. Egypt fractures into competing regions, into smaller kingdoms with smaller ambitions. This period is called the First Intermediate Period, about 200 years of fragmentation and suffering of a great civilization, trying to remember what it was. But Egypt has survived the desert for 3,000 years. It knows how to survive. In our next chapter, a king from the south reunites the two lands, and Egypt blooms again. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. 200 years of fragmentation. 200 years of local rulers and empty granaries. And a people struggling to remember what Egypt once was. And then a king rises from the south. His name is Imhotep II, a ruler of Thebes, the great city on the upper Nile, where the temples are tall and the priests are powerful, and the memory of a unified Egypt has never quite faded. Around 2055 before the Common Era, Mentuhotep defeats the northern rulers, brings the two lands together again, restores the double crown, restores Maat. Egypt breathes again. The Middle Kingdom that follows his reign is one of the finest periods in all of Egyptian history. Not as monumental as the Old Kingdom, not as famous, but perhaps more human. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom are less remote, less purely divine, more concerned with the welfare of their people. Literature flourishes, scribes write stories, and poems and wisdom texts that reveal a civilization thinking deeply about its own nature. One text from this period, the story of Sinui, tells of a courtier who flees Egypt in fear and spends years in exile, longing to return, to be buried in Egyptian soil, under the Nile's black earth, among his own people. It is one of the oldest pieces of literature in the world, and it reads like something written yesterday. The longing for home, the fear of dying far from where you belong. These things do not change. Art in the Middle Kingdom reaches new heights of refinement. Sculpture becomes more expressive. The faces of the pharaohs show something the Old Kingdom rarely permitted, wherein is concerned humanity. In our next chapter, strangers arrive on the horizon, and Egypt faces its first foreign occupation. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. For most of its history, Egypt is protected by geography. To the east and west, the desert, impassable, merciless, a natural wall, more effective than any stone. To the north, the Mediterranean. To the south, the cataracts of the Nile, stretches of shallow, rocky water that no large fleet can navigate. Egypt is a fortress that nature has built, and for 2,000 years no foreign army has conquered it. Around 1650, before the Common Era, that changes. From the northeast, from the lands of Canaan and the Levant, a people migrates into Egypt. Slowly at first, traders and settlers, filtering into the Nile Delta, building communities, establishing themselves, then taking control. The Egyptians call them the Hyksos, a word meaning rulers of foreign lands, or perhaps foreign rulers. Who exactly they are remains debated, a Semitic-speaking people skilled in warfare, bringing with them technologies that Egypt has never encountered. The horse-drawn chariot, a weapon of war, so fast and so devastating that Egyptian foot soldiers have no answer for it. The composite bow, more powerful than anything Egyptian archers carry. Bronze weapons, harder and sharper than what Egypt currently uses. The Hyksos take control of Lower Egypt. They establish their capital at a city called Avaris in the Delta, and for more than a century, Egypt is divided again. Hyksos in the north, native Egyptian rulers in the south, humiliated, diminished, but not finished. In Thebes, in the south, an Egyptian dynasty is growing, learning from its conquerors, studying the chariot, mastering the new weapons, building a new kind of army, waiting for its moment. In our next chapter, that moment arrives and Egypt rises, into its greatest era. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The Hyksos have been driven out. A new dynasty rules Egypt. The 18th, the first of the new kingdom. The most celebrated era in all of Egyptian history. Egypt is stronger than it has ever been. Its army is rebuilt, its borders expanded, its wealth multiplied by trade and conquest. And in the middle of this golden age, a woman takes the throne. Her name is Hatshepsut. She is the daughter of a pharaoh, the widow of a pharaoh, the stepmother of a pharaoh. And she decides that these connections are not enough, that she herself will wear the double crown, will carry the crook and flail, will rule Egypt as pharaoh. Not as regent, not as queen, as pharaoh. She has herself depicted in the traditional male form with the false beard of pharaonic authority, with the broad shoulders of divine kingship, standing as pharaohs stand, striding forward, eternal, powerful, undeniable. She rules for 22 years, more than most male pharaohs, and she rules well. She does not pursue war. She pursues trade. She sends expeditions to a mysterious land called Punt, somewhere to the south. Perhaps the Horn of Africa, where the Egyptians find incense trees and ebony, live animals and gold. She builds her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari on the west bank of the Nile. Is one of the most beautiful structures Egypt ever produces. 3 colonnaded terraces, rising against the golden cliff face. Still standing, still breathtaking, 3,500 years later. After her death, someone tries to erase her. Her images are defaced, her name chiseled from the walls, her statues smashed in buried pits. Perhaps her successor wanted to claim her accomplishments for himself. Perhaps there were other reasons. History does not say. But the stone remembered, archaeologists found her beneath the erasure, restored her name, restored her face, restored her to history, where she belongs. In our next chapter, a pharaoh attempts something even more radical than ruling as a woman. He attempts to change the religion of Egypt itself. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. Egypt has worshipped the same gods for over 1,000 years. Ra, the sun god, Osiris, god of the dead, Isis, goddess of magic, Horus, the falcon god, Amun, king of the gods, and hundreds more. A vast, complex, ancient pantheon, woven into every aspect of Egyptian life. And then a pharaoh comes to power who decides that all of this is wrong. His name is Imhotep the Fourth. He rules in the 14th century, before the Common Era, the height of the New Kingdom, Egypt at its most powerful, its most prosperous, its most settled. And he shatters all of it. He declares that there is only one God, not Amun, not Ra, not Osiris, but the Aten, the disk of the sun itself, the pure light that falls on all living things, the source of all life, the one true God. He changes his own name to Akhenaten, servant of the Aten. He closes the temples of the other gods. He erases their names from the walls. He dismisses their priests. He confiscates their wealth. He builds an entirely new city in the desert, Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Modern-day Amarna, a city that springs from nothing in a matter of years, dedicated entirely to the worship of a single God. This is the first time in recorded history that a state attempts to impose monotheism. One God, one truth, one light that falls on everything. Egypt does not accept it. The priests resist. The people resist. The old gods do not disappear simply because a pharaoh commands them to. After 17 years of rule, Akhenaten dies. His city is abandoned. His temples are demolished. His name is chiseled from the walls. The old gods return. The priests take back their temples. Egypt tries to forget that he ever existed. But the idea of a single God does not disappear from the ancient world. In our next chapter, Akhenaten's son inherits a kingdom in chaos and becomes the most famous pharaoh in history, not for what he did, but for what was found in his tomb. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. Egypt has worshipped the same gods for over 1,000 years. Ra, the sun god, Osiris, god of the dead, Isis, goddess of magic, Horus, the falcon god, Amun, king of the gods, and hundreds more. A vast, complex, ancient pantheon, woven into every aspect of Egyptian life. And then a pharaoh comes to power who decides that all of this is wrong. His name is Imhotep the Fourth. He rules in the 14th century, before the Common Era, the height of the New Kingdom, Egypt at its most powerful, its most prosperous, its most settled. And he shatters all of it. He declares that there is only one God, not Amun, not Ra, not Osiris, but the Aten, the disk of the sun itself, the pure light that falls on all living things, the source of all life, the one true God. He changes his own name to Akhenaten, servant of the Aten. He closes the temples of the other gods. He erases their names from the walls. He dismisses their priests. He confiscates their wealth. He builds an entirely new city in the desert, Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Modern-day Amarna, A city that springs from nothing in a matter of years, dedicated entirely to the worship of a single god. This is the first time in recorded history that a state attempts to impose monotheism. One God, one truth, one light that falls on everything. Egypt does not accept it. The priests resist. The people resist. The old gods do not disappear, simply because a pharaoh commands them to. After 17 years of rule, Akhenaten dies. His city is abandoned. His temples are demolished. His name is chiseled from the walls. The old gods return. The priests take back their temples. Egypt tries to forget that he ever existed. But the idea of a single god does not disappear from the ancient world. In our next chapter, Akhenaten's son inherits a kingdom in chaos and becomes the most famous pharaoh in history, not for what he did, but for what was found in his tomb. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Akhenaten is dead, his city abandoned, his god forgotten, his revolution erased from the walls of Egypt as completely as the priests and the scribes can manage. His son inherits the throne, a boy, perhaps 9 years old, perhaps 10. History is not certain. His name at birth is Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten, his father's god encoded in his very name. He changes it, or rather, the priests around him change it to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, the old god, the restored god, the god who is never really gone. He rules for 9 years, a boy king guided by powerful advisors, an elderly courtier named a general named Horemheb, men who know that Egypt needs stability after the chaos of his father's reign. He restores the old temples, he brings the priests back. He moves the capital from Amarna back to Thebes. He undoes as much of his father's legacy as a child can undo. And then, at about 19, he dies. Possibly from an infection, possibly from a fall, possibly from other causes. The cause of his death has been debated by scientists and historians for 100 years. He is buried in the Valley of the Kings in a small tomb hastily prepared. Not the grand burial a pharaoh would normally receive, because there was no time, because he was so young, because no one expected this. For 3,000 years, his tomb is forgotten, covered by debris from later excavations hidden beneath the desert floor. And then, on the 4th of November 1922, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter finds a step carved in the rock at the bottom of a trench in the Valley of the Kings. He clears the debris. He finds a door sealed intact. On the 26th of November, he makes a small hole in the door, holds a candle to it, peers through. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, stands beside him, asks in the darkness, "Can you see anything?" Carter is silent for a long moment. Then he says, "Yes, wonderful things. 5,000 objects, gold chariots, statues, jewelry, furniture, a solid gold death mask of such beauty that it stops the breath of everyone who sees it. A minor king, a boy who ruled 9 years and died before his time, made immortal by accident. by the simple fact that his tomb was forgotten and therefore never robbed. In our next chapter, the greatest of all pharaohs takes the throne and rules for 66 years. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. Akhenaten is dead, his city abandoned, his god forgotten, his revolution erased from the walls of Egypt as completely as the priests and the scribes can manage. His son inherits the throne, a boy, perhaps 9 years old, perhaps 10. History is not certain. His name at birth is Tutankhamun, living image of the Aten, his father's god encoded in his very name. He changes it, or rather, the priests around him change it, to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, the old god, the restored god, the god who was never really gone. He rules for 9 years, a boy king guided by powerful advisors, an elderly courtier named a general named Horemheb, men who know that Egypt needs stability after the chaos of his father's reign. He restores the old temples, he brings the priests back. He moves the capital from Amarna back to Thebes. He undoes as much of his father's legacy as a child can undo. And then, at about 19, he dies. Possibly from an infection, possibly from a fall, possibly from other causes. The cause of his death has been debated by scientists and historians for 100 years. He is buried in the Valley of the Kings in a small tomb hastily prepared, not the grand burial a pharaoh would normally receive, because there was no time, because he was so young, because no one expected this. For 3,000 years, his tomb is forgotten, covered by debris from later excavations hidden beneath the desert floor. And then, on the 4th of November 1922, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter finds a step carved in the rock at the bottom of a trench in the Valley of the Kings. He clears the debris. He finds a door sealed intact. On the 26th of November, he makes a small hole in the door, holds a candle to it, peers through. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, stands beside him, asks in the darkness, "Can you see anything?" Carter is silent for a long moment, and he says, "Yes, wonderful things. 5,000 objects, gold chariots, statues, jewelry, furniture, a solid gold death mask of such beauty that it stops the breath of everyone who sees it. A minor king, a boy who ruled 9 years and died before his time, made immortal by accident, by the simple fact that his tomb was forgotten and therefore never robbed. In our next chapter, the greatest of all pharaohs takes the throne and rules for 66 years. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. Of all the pharaohs, whoever wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, one name echoes louder than all the others. Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great. He comes to the throne around 1279, before the Common Era. He is about 25 years old. He will reign for 66 years, and he will stamp his name on Egypt with a thoroughness that no pharaoh before or after will quite match. He is a warrior. In the 5th year of his reign, He leads his army north to meet the Hittites, the great rival empire to the northeast, at a place called Kadesh on the Orontes River in what is today Syria. The battle nearly kills him. His army is ambushed. His forces scatter. Ramesses himself is almost surrounded. And then, according to the accounts, he later commissions, he rallies, he fights his way through, he turns the battle. Whether the accounts are entirely accurate is disputed. The Hittites claim victory too. The truth is probably that it was a draw, a bloody, exhausting stalemate. But what follows is extraordinary. 16 years after Kadesh, Egypt and the Hittites sign a peace treaty, the oldest surviving peace treaty in human history, inscribed on silver tablets preserved in the archives of both empires. Ramesses builds, constantly everywhere, Abu Simbel, two massive temples carved directly into a sandstone cliff in the far south of Egypt. 4 colossal statues of himself, 20 meters tall, sitting guard at the entrance. He adds his name to monuments built by others, carves his cartouche over older inscriptions, claims the accomplishments of previous pharaohs as his own. He has perhaps 100 children by multiple wives. He outlives most of them. He dies at about 90 years old, having ruled for 66 years, having filled Egypt with his face and his name. So thoroughly that even 3,000 years later, in museums around the world, it is his face that visitors most often recognize. In our next chapter, we follow the pharaohs into the place they believed would bring them to the eternal life they had prepared for since the moment they were born. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. On the west bank of the Nile, across the river from Thebes, the great capital of the new kingdom, there is a valley. Dry, hidden, surrounded by limestone cliffs that glow gold and amber in the afternoon light. A place where the sun sets each evening, behind the western mountains, where the Egyptians believe the dead go when they leave the living world. This is the Valley of the Kings. For nearly 500 years, the pharaohs of the new kingdom are buried here, not in pyramids. The age of pyramids is over. The great stone mountains of Giza have long since been looted, their treasures taken, their chambers violated. The new approach is secrecy. Cut the tomb deep into the rock, seal it, hide it. Cover the entrance with debris. Let the desert forget it. The tombs are extraordinary. Descending corridors cut into the living rock, painted walls that tell the story of the pharaoh's journey through the underworld. The prayers, the spells, the maps of the afterlife. Everything the dead king will need to navigate the realm of Osiris, to be judged worthy, to achieve eternal life. Because this is what all the pyramids and all the mummies and all the elaborate funerary rituals are ultimately about. death, life, eternal life. The conviction that the individual does not simply end, that the person who lived and loved and ruled continues in another form, in another realm, forever. It is one of the most profound ideas humanity has ever produced, and the Egyptians pursue it with a dedication and a creativity that still moves people who stand in those painted chambers 3,000 years later. In our next chapter, the civilization that built these eternal houses faces a threat it cannot build its way out of. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Around 1200 before the Common Era, something extraordinary happens. Not just to Egypt, to the entire Eastern Mediterranean world. The great Bronze Age civilizations begin to collapse, one after another, in the space of perhaps 50 years. The Hittite Empire, gone. Its capital burned, its royal archives abandoned, its language forgotten for 3,000 years. The Mycenaean civilization of Greece, gone. Its palaces destroyed, its writing system lost. Greece enters 400 years of darkness. The great trading cities of the Levantine coast, gone. Ugarit burned, Megiddo abandoned. Entire civilizations that had stood for centuries, swept away within a generation. Who did this? The Egyptian records speak of a confederation of peoples from the sea. They call them the Sea Peoples, who they are exactly where they come from. Why they appear at this moment is one of the great unsolved mysteries of ancient history. Ramesses III meets them in battle, both on land and at sea, in massive engagements, recorded on the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu. He claims victory. Egypt survives. But Egypt after 1200 is not the Egypt before it. The empire in Canaan is lost. The wealth that flowed from trade with the collapsed civilizations is gone. The pharaohs grow weaker. The priests grow stronger. The army fractures. The new kingdom, the greatest era of Egyptian power, the age of Hatshepsut and Akhenaten, and Tutankhamun, and Ramesses the Great is over. In our next chapter, the long twilight begins as one foreign power after another comes to rule the land of the pharaohs. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The new kingdom is over. The great pharaohs are gone. The empire in Canaan is lost. The wealth that once flowed into Thebes and Memphis has slowed to a trickle. What follows is a long and complicated twilight. Centuries of fragmentation, of divided kingdoms, of foreign rulers who claim the double crown. but are not Egyptian by birth. From the south come the Nubians, a powerful kingdom from the land called Kush, modern-day Sudan. A people who have traded with Egypt for millennia, who have adopted Egyptian customs, who worship Egyptian gods, who build their own pyramids in the Nubian desert. Around 727 before the Common Era, the Nubian king Paye marches north. He defeats the fractured rulers of Egypt. He takes the double crown. He becomes pharaoh. The 25th dynasty, the Nubian dynasty, who rule Egypt for nearly a century, and who genuinely love Egyptian tradition, who restore temples, who revive old artistic forms, who try, sincerely, to be worthy of the civilization they have inherited. Then come the Assyrians, the great military empire of Mesopotamia, who invade in 671, who sack Memphis, who drive the Nubians south. Then come the Persians in 525 before the Common Era. Cambyses II, who defeats the last native Egyptian pharaoh at the Battle of Pelusium and makes Egypt a province of the Achaemenid Empire. And yet Egypt endures, its temples still stand, its priests still chant the ancient prayers. The Nile still floods, the silt still falls, and the people still plant their seeds in the black earth. Because some things are older than any empire and stronger. In our next chapter, the greatest conqueror the ancient world has ever seen arrives at Egypt's borders and changes everything again. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. It is 332 before the Common Era. Egypt has been under Persian rule for nearly 2 centuries. Its people have not forgotten the old ways. The temples still stand. The priests still pray. The gods still watch from painted walls. But the Persians are not loved. They are tolerated. And when a young Macedonian king marches south through the Levant, defeating the Persian army as he goes, Egypt does not resist him. It opens its gates. His name is Alexander. He's 24 years old. He has already conquered more territory than most rulers manage in a lifetime. And he is just beginning. The Egyptians do not see a conqueror arrive. They see a liberator. Alexander visits the oracle at the oasis of Siwa, deep in the western desert, where the priests of Amun declare him the son of the god, a divine being, a pharaoh. He accepts this genuinely or politically. No one can say. Perhaps both. He founds a city on the Mediterranean coast. He calls it Alexandria, as he calls cities in his own name, across the known world. But this Alexandria will be different. This one will outlast him, will become one of the great intellectual centers of the ancient world. And then he leaves east toward Persia, toward India, toward the edge of the world he is determined to reach. He never returns to Egypt. He dies in Babylon in 323, 32 years old, having conquered the largest empire the ancient world has ever seen. One of his generals takes Egypt. His name is Ptolemy. And from Ptolemy comes a dynasty that will rule Egypt for 300 years, that will produce some of the most fascinating rulers in the history of the ancient world, and one above all others. In our next chapter, the last and greatest of the Ptolemies takes the throne. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. She is the 7th ruler of her dynasty, to bear the name Cleopatra. History remembers only one. Cleopatra the 7th, the last pharaoh of Egypt, the last of the Ptolemies, the last independent ruler this ancient land will ever have. She is born around 70, before the Common Era. She comes to power at 18, the first ruler of her dynasty. To learn the Egyptian language, her predecessors governed Egypt for 2.5 centuries without speaking the language of their subjects. Cleopatra speaks 9 languages. She is a mathematician, a physician, a philosopher, a student of the ancient texts of the civilization she rules. She is, by every account, one of the most intelligent and formidable people of the ancient world. She is also the ruler of a kingdom in decline. Egypt is wealthy, but Rome is more powerful. Rome is expanding. Rome's generals and senators look at Egypt the way the powerful always look at the rich and the vulnerable. Cleopatra understands this, and she acts. When Julius Caesar arrives in Egypt in 48 before the Common Era, she has herself smuggled into the royal palace, rolled in a carpet, or so the story goes. She emerges before him, and within days, she has made him an ally, a lover, a protector. When Caesar is assassinated, she finds another Roman general, Mark Antony, the most powerful man in the East. They become partners in politics and war and life. They have 3 children. Together they challenge Octavian, Caesar's heir, for control of the Roman world. At the Battle of Actium, in 31 before the Common Era, their fleet is defeated. They flee to Alexandria. Antony dies first, a wound, a mistake. A man who believed false reports of Cleopatra's death and fell on his own sword. Cleopatra survives him by a few days. She meets with Octavian. She understands what awaits her in Rome, to be paraded through the streets as a defeated queen, a trophy, a symbol of Rome's power. She will not allow it. On the 12th of August, 30 before the Common Era, Cleopatra dies the exact method is not certain. Ancient sources speak of a snake. Modern scholars debate it. What is certain is that she chose how to leave, as she had always chosen, on her own terms. She is 39 years old, and with her death, 3,000 years of pharaonic Egypt comes quietly to its end. In our next chapter, we stand at the grave of a civilization and understand what was lost and what was not. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Cleopatra is dead. Egypt is a Roman province. The double crown that pharaohs wore for 3,000 years is gone. Octavian, who will soon become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, takes Egypt for himself. Not as a Roman province to be governed by a senator, but as his personal domain, the richest land in the world, the granary that feeds Rome, is alone. For the next 4 centuries, Egypt is Roman. The Nile still floods, the crops still grow. The grain ships still sail north to feed the empire. But something is changing, slowly, quietly, at the edges. A new religion spreads along the trade routes of the Roman Empire, Christianity. Born in the hills of Judea, carried by merchants and soldiers and wandering teachers to every corner of the Roman world. It reaches Egypt early. The Gospel of Mark is said to have been written for the Egyptian church. Alexandria becomes one of the great centers of early Christian thought, its scholars and theologians debating the nature of Christ and the meaning of Scripture with the same intensity. Its earliest scholars debated mathematics and philosophy. And as Christianity grows, the old gods fade. The temples close one by one. The priests who have maintained the ancient rituals for 3,000 years grow old and are not replaced. On the island of Philae, at the first cataract of the Nile, there is a temple of Isis, the last temple of the ancient Egyptian religion, still operating. In the year 394 of the Common Era, the last known hieroglyphic inscription is carved on its walls, a priest, a prayer, in the ancient script. And then silence. The language that built the pyramids, that recorded the journeys of pharaohs to the afterlife, that filled the valley of the kings with its words and images, is spoken no more, written no more, understood by no one living. For 1,400 years, hieroglyphs are a mystery, beautiful, visible everywhere, on temple walls and obelisks, and the faces of tombs, but silent, unreadable. A civilization sealed behind its own script. In our final chapter, the key is found, and 3,000 years of silence ends. Rest now. The story continues. continue our story. Cleopatra is dead. Egypt is a Roman province. The double crown that pharaohs wore for 3,000 years is gone. Octavian, who will soon become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, takes Egypt for himself, not as a Roman province to be governed by a senator, but as his personal domain, the richest land in the world, the granary that feeds Rome, his alone. For the next 4 centuries, Egypt is Roman. The Nile still floods, the crops still grow. The grain ships still sail north to feed the empire. But something is changing, slowly, quietly, at the edges. A new religion spreads along the trade routes of the Roman Empire, Christianity. Born in the hills of Judea, carried by merchants and soldiers and wandering teachers, to every corner of the Roman world. It reaches Egypt early. The Gospel of Mark is said to have been written for the Egyptian church. Alexandria becomes one of the great centers of early Christian thought, its scholars and theologians debating the nature of Christ and the meaning of Scripture with the same intensity its earliest scholars debated mathematics and philosophy. And as Christianity grows, the old gods fade. The temples close one by one. The priests who have maintained the ancient rituals for 3,000 years grow old and are not replaced. On the island of Philae, at the first cataract of the Nile, there is a temple of Isis, the last temple of the ancient Egyptian religion, still operating. In the year 1394 of the Common Era, the last known hieroglyphic inscription is carved on its walls, a priest, a prayer, in the ancient script, and then silence. The language that built the pyramids, that recorded the journeys of pharaohs to the afterlife, that filled the valley of the kings with its words and images, is spoken no more, written no more, understood by no one living. For 1,400 years, hieroglyphs are a mystery, beautiful, visible everywhere, on temple walls and obelisks, and the faces of tombs, but silent, unreadable, a civilization sealed behind its own script. In our final chapter, the key is found, and 3,000 years of silence ends. Rest now, the story continues. We arrive at the end of our story. The temples are closed. The priests are gone. The hieroglyphs are silent. Egypt is a Roman province, then a Byzantine one, then Arab, then Ottoman. And the ancient world disappears beneath the sand. The pyramids remain visible, always. You cannot hide a pyramid. Travelers from across the world come to stand before them and stare and wonder. But what they mean, what the words carved on every wall and every tomb actually say, this no one knows for 14 centuries. The script is beautiful, mysterious, utterly unreadable. Until 1799. A soldier in Napoleon's army, digging fortifications, near the town of Rosetta, in the Egyptian delta, strikes a stone, a large black granite slab covered in writing, 3 scripts, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Demotic, a later Egyptian script, and Greek. The same text in 3 languages. The Rosetta Stone. For 23 years, the scholars of Europe work on it, using the Greek as their key, letter by letter, symbol by symbol. In 1822, a young French scholar named Jean-François Champollion cracks the code. He runs through the streets of Paris, bursts into his brother's office, shouts that he has done it, and collapses from the sheer weight of what he has just accomplished. The hieroglyphs speak again, and what they say is extraordinary. Prayers and love poems, medical texts and astronomical records, tax receipts and royal decrees, the complaints of workers who have not been paid, the grief of a woman for her dead husband. Human voices preserved in stone for 3,000 years, waiting for someone to learn to listen. This is the legacy of ancient Egypt, not the pyramids alone, not the gold masks, not the mummies, but the insistence that what happens here matters, that the life of a person deserves to be recorded, that beauty is worth building, even when you know it will not last, that the dead should be remembered, that the story should be told. Tonight we have followed that story together, from the first flood of the Nile to the last cartouche carved on the wall of Philae, from the she-wolf's granddaughter to the last pharaoh who chose her own ending. 3,000 years, along one river, in one desert, under one sun. Now rest. The story has been told. Sleep well.